Yeah, so I will be talking about fair training in Elixir Europe, but also wider. So how do we do it in Elixir Europe, but also more about how do we make training fair? And I think I actually may have some answers to the questions that Jason was asked. Hopefully, we'll see about that. So this is the work which is done in Elixir, but it's not work only done by Elixir, and it's the work done by like wider community, and not by me, but the large group of people in the Elixir. So first, what is Elixir? It's a large European life science research infrastructure with a lot of nodes around in Europe, and also not exclusively in Europe, actually. And the work in Elixir is divided into in between the platforms. So there is data tools, compute, interoperability, and training platform. They all have their own focus in how to support researchers in those different areas. But the work that I will be describing here is done in the training platform, also in collaboration with other platforms, actually. And the training platforms is focused on coordinating training activities and training life science researchers and helping the researchers find the right training materials. So how does that, or maybe before how we do it, this is about, so actually we started thinking about like how do we train researchers about FAIR. So what is FAIR? I don't know if everybody knows what FAIR is, but it's about making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And we want to be able to prepare researchers to learn about how they can implement fair data stewardship. Yeah? What are the skills that are necessary to implement fair data stewardship? And yeah, what are the skills and how people can do it, where people can find the resources, what kind of training materials, training courses are there. And we started thinking about it, we had 1 year ago a meeting, face-to-face meeting at the All Hands meeting in Berlin. And we had a meeting where the title of the meeting was How to Make Training Fair. And we had a mix of different talks which were from training about fair data stewardship and about making training fair. And it was clear that these are two very different but also very interconnected things. So we started a working group in Elixir to work it out. And from the very beginning, we started with 2 task forces. And one task force was about the training in fair data stewardship skills. So how to implement fair data stewardship in your institution, in your research. And the second task force is about how do we make training, resources, courses fair. So first about the first task force, the first thing that we thought, okay, let's start looking if we can actually find the materials. So TESS is the Elixir training platform, is a place where you can find training resources. If you're looking, for example, for bioinformatics training, you want to find a workshop or a training material in variant calling, you can go to TESS and you will search for workshop on training materials. And there are a lot of training materials there. So we thought, okay, let's try to find some materials which will help us learn about fair data stewardship. And it turned out that it's very hard because most of the skills that are necessary for implementing fair data stewardship are not life science related. They're skills like understanding data licenses or understanding internet protocols. And very often people will not register those materials in TESS. And then there are no control vocabularies, or like at first, like we thought maybe there are, but we started looking into it, and it turns out that even if there are training materials, they're not properly annotated, and therefore we cannot find them. Because those control vocabularies and ontologies which touch upon those skills are not existent. So we actually realized, yeah, well, we can't do the first one before we actually have fair training materials. I mean, that we have training materials about fair data stewardship in a fair manner. Yeah, so we have to first make them findable and accessible. But luckily, we already started the task force 2. So then we focused on the work on the task force 2. And then at the biohackathon in Paris last year, we started looking at the existing training materials. And it might be confusing because usually the FAIR principles are used to talk about data, but actually training materials are a special kind of data. So we were thinking, but they're different from the other types of data. So we are thinking about how this applies. Yeah. So we and also what is the most important in terms of training around FAIR? Like, it's probably findability and accessibility, reusability. I will talk a bit about interoperability, but I think it's still fuzzy. No, maybe not fuzzy, but there's a lot of disagreement, and I think there will be a lot of disagreement what it actually means. But it's nice because it's interesting discussions. So at the biohackathon, we started looking at the existing materials and trying to evaluate their fairness. Yeah. So we looked at the carpentry's training materials, some workshops, Elixir train the trainer materials, Galaxy training materials, and we tried to apply fair metrics which exist for data, and we had very hard time to actually apply them. We could not interpret them for training materials. So we think we need some adaptation of the existing principles so that they make sense for training, and that this is what people want from the training. Yeah. So like, how do we make it more findable, accessible? What is important in training? And we also got into the discussions about what actually does it mean accessible in terms of training, because with the data we know it's about how we can access the data, but if we say accessible training, for some people it means something else. It's accessible for people from different backgrounds and so on. So yeah, we started this work at the biohackathon, and we continued from there. And we, at some point, we got inspired by the initiative from library carpentry. There was a sprint last year about defining top 10 things that you can do in order to make some kind of data or software more fair. And we have actually joined the sprint with the also defining top 10 things for fair software. But then afterwards, we decided in our working group that it would be very interesting to define those top 10 things that we can do in order to improve the fairness of the training materials. So we defined those top 10 things, which are actually like the easy 10 things that we can do, and it's already a nice guidelines for people who haven't thought about it yet. So how can we improve the findability? We need to have those descriptive keyboards and some controlled vocabularies. The trouble here is that there are none yet, but I will address it a little bit later, so we're working on it now. Use a unique identifier. So someone mentioned the DOIs, and someone mentioned citing training materials. Actually, there is no reason why you shouldn't be able to cite training materials. As an example, if you have your lesson on GitHub, and there's nothing, if it's text, you can make it on GitHub, you can make a website, and then you can make a release of your lesson, and you can connect it to Zenodo, and you get a DOI on Zenodo, and then you can even tell people how to cite your training material. And also, someone mentioned like, how do we count all those, like how many times the training, for example, have been used? If there's a workshop based on the training material, there's no reason why they shouldn't be using your DOI to cite you by the DOI, and then we can start counting all those occurrences. So in the end, you should be able to go to test and see, okay, this is a training material, and it had been taught 20 times already, yeah, because we're using this DOI and we keep track of it. So yeah, unique identifiers are great, but also make it findable in a registry. It's definitely, it shouldn't be on your hard drive. I mean, it should be also probably on your hard drive, but it should be somewhere else. And there are specialized registries, so you can register it in tests. That's already first step. And I think one of the goals here is we really have to stop with everyone developing their own training material every time. I'm always impressed by when I look at the carpentry's lesson, when there are hundreds of people contributing to the lessons, and then there will be a screenshot in the lesson, and it will get outdated every 2 months, but there will be always someone who is now preparing to teach it, and they will find it out, and then will prepare a new version, and they will make a pull request to the lesson, and it will be immediately reviewed and accepted. Yeah. So it's also like the collaborative way of developing training materials. At least it will facilitate it. How do we make it accessible? I already mentioned Zenodo, so make it accessible on in some repository. If you cannot do it for some reasons, at least make sure that you describe how people can access it. If it's possible to access it, maybe you need a membership in some kind of organization to access it. Of course, ideally, no. Ideally, it should be widely accessible. Interoperable. That's a little bit tricky, but for me, interoperable, or like, yeah, for us, we're thinking about it. So first of all, you want it to be connected to other data sets, the data sets, training materials, software that it uses, but also describe very well what are the requirements for this workshop and what are the learning outcomes from this workshop. Because then we can actually start building learning paths automatically. Yeah? If this is machine readable metadata, like in the ideal world in the future, you will type in you want to go from A to Z, and the computer will build for you the whole learning path and provide you with all the possible courses on the way, because it will match all the requirements and outcomes. But before we get to that, at least you want the learners to come and see what are the requirements for them to participate in the workshop and what are the outcomes when they finish the workshop. Yeah? And yeah, this is, I think, for me, the holy grail. Like, we really should start reusing instead of reinventing, rewriting, all those things. But no one can use it if you don't use the license. So first thing you can do, use the license for your training material. Ideally CC 0 probably, because with the hundreds of people contributed to the lessons, it gets harder and harder to actually attribute all the people who contributed to it. Although if you have it on GitHub, you have all the contributors kept track of, so it makes it a bit simpler. Target trainers so that they know. So also the trainers need to know what is expected, and also how to teach the materials, because it will improve the reusability. I really like in the carpentries lessons, every lesson comes with the instructor notes, which describe how to teach this specific material. Yeah, because not necessarily people know how to teach. One thing is the lesson that you follow and you teach this content, but you also need to know what are the tips and tricks to teach it. And make sure that people can know how to credit your work. Yeah, so you have a DOI. So say I want to be cited that way, and at least we increase the rewards for people who spend so much time in creating this. So there are two other initiatives that we are working on together with this project, because we need those vocabularies, we need the machine readability, the metadata. So one is BioSchemas. In the BioSchemas, there are three profiles that we're working on in this context. There's course insights, and training materials. So when I'm talking about training content here, it's both about the lessons, yeah, so the things that you teach, but also, for example, the website for your workshop. Yeah, if you have a website for a workshop, you also want people to find it easily, and you want them to find it by the metadata when the workshop starts, when it finishes, where it is, so that they can find the closest workshop to them and what they're going to learn. So we're working on the BioSchemas. BioSchemas, it's a way to add semantic markup to your website, and then it will be indexed by the search engines. And if someone is going to Google for the training material, or like workshop happening in Belgium in next 2 weeks, they should be able to find the right course. Yeah. So we're working on that. They're almost finished, and we're not doing it alone. It's work with there's a BioSchemas group, but also together with Goblet and with other organizations. And the second very important piece is those terminologies that I mentioned. There's an initiative, Terms for First Skills, and it's defining it probably won't be like the full-fledged ontology, but it will be a vocabulary or a thesaurus of the terms that we can use to describe the skills that are necessary for implementing fair data stewardship. So what's next? I think this is like very, very beginning. We're only defining what needs to be done, but it's not something that we can do in the group. It has to be the whole community adopting those good practices and those guidelines. And then once we have the terms, everyone can start using those terms to annotate their training resources, and then we can start finding them. Yeah? But there will be a long way before that happens. Yeah, thank you very much. Yes.
I can find the 10 recommendations on the Elixir page. The recommendations you mentioned for fairness.
Top 10 things.
Top 10, yeah. Is there a link for that?
It's not findable, yeah. We have a poster. Find Melissa today. Yeah.
It's on F1000 research. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. I will tweet the DOI for the
Thank you.
entry. Yeah.
One question that came up to my mind now. Patricia Palagio, SIB, Swiss Institute of Bioinformatics, Elixir. And the question was, when you said it would, if we put the materials online, they could be accessible, and by being accessed, we will know how many people have used the materials. In fact, this is not necessarily one relates to another one, and I was wondering, you see, because it's not because it has been accessed or it has been downloaded that it's going to be used, how we could ensure that we are capturing the right information, meaning that the materials that are being used are used in classes and not only read, downloaded, and put on a computer and not used. You see something that, I don't know how to answer that.
So I think if we use the trackable DOIs, that's the first step. So then we know when people cite it. It doesn't mean that they were teaching it, I agree. But what if we make sure that in the template for the workshop, there is a field that you have to fill in, which is the DOI of the training material that you're teaching in the workshop, and then we can actually start tracking it and displaying it somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So be another step.
Of course, it's only if people will use this template. Yeah. Otherwise, it would be very hard.
To figure out.
But once we have that, what was it? Course instance BioSchemas description. Then, if we make sure that there is a place to put a DOI for the training material that is used in there, that should improve if people adopt the course instance BioSchemas descriptions. Yeah.
Thank you.
One more question, if I may.
I think we have to move on. We're a bit behind, but so.